I think that would probably be best couched in my journey from stand-up comedian to counselor.
Yeah, but we won't hold it against you that you're a counselor.
Hope you didn't leave the microphone on.
We're going to do this thing with fucking aplomb and other words like that.
Panache.
Yeah. And moxie. How about that one? You like that one? I like
moxie, kid. See?
That's old school.
my father would have called me Moxie if my mother would have let him. Hey there, and welcome to the Recovery Crew podcast. I'm Dr. Bob Baer, and our guest today is JC Shakespeare. Yes, we actually have Shakespeare on the show today. We've been working on him for about 4 centuries now, and we dug him up. And anyway, JC is a great therapist and writer and screenplay dude, and just a wise spiritual mentor to many. And so we'll be talking about a variety of things today that have to do with transformation and deep feeling. JC is a good dude. You'll get a lot out of this. It's going to be a fun dance. So welcome here. You can find us on YouTube, the Recovery Crew podcast at Deep Waters Recovery. And we are on all of the social media platforms and podcast platforms. So find us. It's deepwatersrecovery.com is the website. We are we're this Recovery Crew podcast. We're also a network of connecting with other treatment centers to make sure folks find their way to the right kind of healing for addiction and trauma and for launching into lives of meaning. We have a 10-hour weekly program that's online right now. And also the Deep Waters Intensive is a weekend experience of transformation. So we're a movement of healing and getting people launched into their authentic lives. So we're glad you're with us today. Enjoy the podcast. You're in the deep waters now. All right, so here we go. I want to. There's Wes Shepard. Wes is mildly famous in certain circles. He's also a very humble dude, but he's got a very successful podcast called Hard Factor. But he has agreed to come on here because his recovery is on fire, and he wants to share some of the beauty of that with us. So Wes is going to be a co-host on some of our upcoming podcasts. Welcome, Wes.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. Glad you're here. And so Shakespeare. What if we could actually get Shakespeare on this podcast from the 16th century? Do you think that be possible? If we could possibly pull it off, I'd like to do that. But in the meantime, we will settle for Jesus Christ Shakespeare, JC Shakespeare. Actually, those aren't his initials. He has a slight ego, but not that big.
Well, yeah, it's Julius Caesar Shakespeare.
Okay, got it. The other guy. Okay. So anyway, JC Shakespeare is amongst us today. He's going to tell his story. He has a great story, and actually, he's a very wise dude that's brought a lot of healing to a lot of people. I don't know if, so before we launch into all that, Nicole Chargois is our program manager and keeps, whenever everything's falling off the wagon behind me and the team here at Deep Waters, she picks it up with grace. She reminds me of, somebody said in a meeting this morning, what would Audrey Hepburn do? Sometimes I think she has that kind of grace about her. So we're really grateful to have Nicole here. Nicole, are you there? Can you kind of let folks know how to reach us and anything else you want to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Deep Waters would love to hear from you. You can reach us at 512-677-7847 or email us at admin@deepwatersrecovery.com. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about our program, comments, or if you want to be part of the podcast. Our website, deepwatersrecovery.com. We post weekly blogs from our community. Our podcast comes out weekly, and you can follow us on all the social media sites, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our YouTube channel is the Recovery Crew Podcast.
Nice. See, Nicole is not crazy about being on camera, but we're gonna sneak her into the show a little bit at a time. Here,
Maybe
kind of
later.
like,
I'm moving rooms right now.
yeah, like Howard Stern's sidekick. What would
Robin.
Robin? And then she
Yeah.
kind of, I like her. I like listening to her more than him. So let's sneak you onto this screen pretty soon, Nicole. Thanks for all that you do.
Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen. I'm in trouble here. You know, I have like a background of entertainment and theater and did some TV, but I got a couple of like pros here, pro comedians. I mean, I can shame other people with the best of them, but these two guys, high level. So, but JC is a writer and a comedian and has done a lot of inner work and has popped out as a therapist, a really good therapist. There's a real spiritual center to the work that he does. And he'll be telling us more about his life, but I wanted to just give a little bio. I guess that's the short bio. Welcome here, JC.
Thank you, Bob. It's great to be here. I love the work that you're doing, and I've participated in the work with you and been deeply enriched by that. So it's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to a great conversation, which is kind of what we do, isn't it?
It is. It's one of the tools we have, words, to try to express all this mysterious shit that is unexpressible, right?
Absolutely.
And I had so much fun, and I've had tears and laughter and joy and crying and screaming with you. It's a little weird to talk out of context, but JC and I have done a bunch of men's weekends to help men find that deeper self. We've also been employees and in leadership at different treatment centers, the horror and the beauty of that, right? So anyway, we're going to get this thing going here. Wes and I are going to kind of poke around at you and get your story. And I know there's some now here's the thing. You got to, depending on when you catch JC Shakespeare, he'll be on a different profound topic that I have no clue about. Today, we're going to talk about the downward spiral, the gene keys, some interesting stuff. So you got an audience that doesn't know shit about it, which is probably really good here. I don't mean our audience. I mean me.
Yeah,
Yes,
I don't know shit about it.
Understood.
How much you know about the downward spiral there, Wes?
I know about my downward spiral, but I don't know about the downward spiral. Or
They're all pretty much the same.
And what about the gene keys? Do you have that all figured out, Wes?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay. Well, one thing the three of us have in common, we have crashed and burned and kind of forced to find a spiritual center in our lives. So Wes actually told his story a couple of weeks ago on here. I'm glad to have you here, JC. I'm going to turn it over to you. When we have our guests on here, we give them the space to kind of tell their story so we can get to know you a little more.
Beautiful. Well, I would say my story started at the end of my adolescence when I was 37. And yeah, you heard that right. I was doing stand-up comedy, trying to make a go of it professionally, and I was at one of those sticking points where I'd gotten my career up to where I was getting professionally booked. I was traveling around doing comedy around the Southwest, and I had done it earlier in Virginia on the East Coast, so I had some East Coast connections. I had some Texas and Western connections, and so I was doing okay, but I really either had to dive in head first and go for it, or back out at one point. And I remember having I was married at the time, and I remember having a conversation with some friends one night. This was probably early 1999. And the topic was, what would you be willing to die for? And there was absolutely nothing. I couldn't come up with an answer to that question. And the next morning I woke up and I was still cogitating on that. And wondering, well, what's so important in my life that I'd be willing to lay it down and let that other thing go on? And there was nothing. and being in a relationship and realizing that if somebody walked into the room and said, "I'm going to kill one of you," I would have been like the little bear in the Far Side cartoon, right? Like, there she is. And that really kind of messed me up. I was like, this is not right. And I started kind of looking at my life and doing that self-reflection. And what I realized was I could do an hour and a half of comedy on things that I was against, right? Anybody who didn't think like me, anybody who had a different worldview, anybody who had a different view of the corporate world, I would tell you what an idiot you were, and I could go on. And I could probably be fairly entertaining doing that. But if you ask me, "Oh, well, okay, JC, what's your idea? What do you stand for?" It's like, nothing, kind of having a good time.
That's kind of That's kind of funny in itself.
Well, it was
kind of a punchline.
Hedonism is great when you're a young man, but when you get into your late 30s, people expect a little more from you.
Right.
And so I started realizing how just self-absorbed and just selfish I was. And it was hard. And I was used to drinking heavily, so I didn't have to feel things like that. Mm. And a little bit later in the year, the universe decided to accelerate this process for me. And on November 4th, 1999, I got popped for a DWI.
Nice.
And I remember, I was still in that angry comic phase, and I was like, oh, they're going to force me to go to AA. So the government's telling me I got to go to a meeting about somebody that says I have to believe in God. What happened to the separation of church and state? And then, I spent the night in jail, of course, and did all that crap. And it was like, they're treating me like a damn criminal. And then a little light bulb went off, and it's like, well, I do this shit every night. I'm a criminal.
I can't spell it, but I are one.
Yeah. So those things occurring, and I decided to had my first go at sobriety on January 1st, 2000. I thought the changing of the millennium. That's a good,
that'll do it.
That's a good marking point, right? And so the other piece of this was I started thinking about what I could do for somebody else that would, basically not be for my benefit. And I mentored a kid at Fulmore Elementary, and I used to go once a week and have lunch with him, throw the football around. Great kid. And it was the first time I kind of got out of myself. And I started going to attend a church in Austin called the Church of Conscious Harmony. Got very active in the spiritual community there, and I actually entered a raffle to go on this trip to the Holy Land, and I won the raffle. And the night before we were supposed to go to Israel, it got canceled because some violence broke out over there. And so they told me for 2 years I could go to as many silent retreats as I wanted to. And I ended up doing a couple 5-day retreats and a 10-day retreat. And I had this very profound experience on a 10-day silent retreat. And if you've never been on a 10-day silent retreat, it'll mess with your head.
Especially you get a comedian
I gotta sit still with this. It's like, who wants to do that, right? And so the first couple of days are very blissful, right? It's quiet. You start to relax and you unwind, and you're doing hours of meditation every day, and the flowers are brighter and the sky is beautiful. And then about day 3 or 4, you're kind of like, I really want to watch some TV and have a cheeseburger, And I went and you were allowed to go and set up a thing with the minister and talk to her a little bit. So I went and had a chat with her, and she said, this is part of the process. It happens to everyone. Stick with it. So I had about 3 days in the middle of that thing that were very turbulent and uncomfortable and unpleasant, a lot of static in my head. And then I started to come out of it on the other end. And it was, looking back on it, that 10-day thing was like it was like a psychedelic experience, but very gentle and very slowed down and very relaxed. none of the intense terror or anything like that. But about the 8th day, we were sitting in morning meditation, and I had this experience. And the best way I can describe it is, if you've ever seen a guy like cracking a safe and he's like listening for the tumblers to click, there was this experience that all the tumblers along my axis mundi just kind of clicked into place. And the only way I can express, like, this was a deep intuitive knowledge, and the only way I can relate it in words is that I had this deep sense of knowing that every single thing that had ever happened to me had been perfect, and I had not been alone. And I could still, as I think about that moment, I can still feel that emotion come up, because that was truly the moment where things changed for me.
Yeah.
And I realized that everything that's put in our path is an opportunity for healing. And from that point onwards, I was still, I got involved with an internet startup that was trying to do this dirty comedy show. And so I'm having these deep spiritual experiences and going into work and trying to write dick jokes. It's like, I had this super profound, the imbalance of those two things was.
You're making Wes really uncomfortable right now.
No, I'm relating tremendously to this right now.
And it's like, there's I love dirty jokes. There's nothing wrong with dirty jokes, but it's like when that is your currency and your livelihood, it's like you're not really operating at the highest level of consciousness you could be operating at. And so this series of events unfolded from that first period of sobriety that I ended up getting remarried. I ended up buying a house. We started having children. I got a job teaching English at a Catholic high school, of all places. It was crazy. And I started having these conversations with adolescents, and I realized, the part I really like is when a kid's having a problem and I sit down and I start talking to them. I don't really like grading their papers where I try to see what they learned from Spark Notes about Huckleberry Finn. Right? I can remember I used to have them turn in papers about Huckleberry Finn right before spring break, and I would have 80 papers carrying around in my briefcase, and I couldn't bring myself to read the first one. And then, we go back to school after spring break, and they go, "Hey, Shakespeare, when are we getting our papers back?" It's like, well, as soon as I can stand to read one. And I hated that part of it. And so, the wheels started spinning, and it's like, well, I really like the conversational part. I love classroom interactions, but I don't like the grading papers and all of that. Why don't I go to school and become a counselor? And so I got into the program at Texas State, and took 3 years and did my master's and got into counseling, and then had just the most bizarre experience. I started my private practice, and I had like 2 or 3 clients. I was still working full-time at St. Michael's, and I started my private practice. I had 2 or 3 kids that came every week, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know if I was helping them, but they kept showing up, and I kept talking to them. And later that year, I had been in a film called Waking Life, directed by Richard Linklater, and I was called Self-Destructive Man, and I went on this rant about how there's no choice in the world and blah 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 blah, and at the end of it, I light myself on fire, and it was a really powerful scene in the movie, and so that had been out for 8-10 years, something like that. And so one night I was watching a football game, and I went up to check my email after the football game, and my email had blown up. All these people, "Hey, I saw you on TV. Hey, what the hell? You were on 60 Minutes. And I'm like, what? 60 Minutes ran a piece on Jared Loughner. He's the guy that shot Gabby Giffords and a bunch of other different people. And in the 60 Minutes piece, they said, Loughner was obsessed with the movie Waking Life. And they showed my scene on 60 Minutes. And the way they edited the story made it look like, here's a kid with mental problems, not getting any help. He watches JC Shakespeare ranting in this movie. he goes out and shoots a bunch of people. And I mean, it was a gut punch. I was just like, oh my God. I actually called Linkletter and talked to him about it. He's like, hey, don't worry about it. Obviously this is, guy's crazy. Don't worry about it. But it was bothering me. And I wrote this piece in the Austin American Statesman. And I said that nihilism is a useful phase for young people to go through. You need to burn down everything that you've been taught, everything that's been conditioned into you. But just like a forest fire, when the forest is black and all this green growth shoots out of the earth, you have to come up with your own set of values and your own beliefs to replace the ones that you burn. And obviously this kid Loeffner got stuck in that. Yeah. Well, my phone started ringing off the hook after that, and that was the launch of my private practice. Yeah. And my practice filled up with little 15, 16-year-old versions of little JC. They were highly intelligent, low motivation, usually smoking pot, maybe doing some psychedelics, didn't give a shit about school, not getting along with their parents.
There's your resume. That's your resume.
That's it. That was it. And so I had to figure out like what would have been helpful to me at 15, 16 years old. And what I came up with was like being listened to as if I've got some intelligence and some heart. Yeah. And that's kind of what I based my practice on, and it kind of developed from there. And I got more and more towards the treatment and addiction field as I went on. So yeah, that's a pretty good indication of my transformation. And what I love about the work is I'm constantly being called to do my own personal development, my own spiritual development work, because otherwise I'm useless to my clients. Yeah. And so it keeps me honest. I don't tell them anything I don't do myself.
Wes steered clear of counselor school, but they don't talk a whole lot about doing your own work in most formal academic settings to train therapists, which is
they tell you to make sure you're in therapy.
Yeah, once.
Yeah. But
go ahead.
I was just going to say I found the teachings of a guy named Gurdjieff through the Church of Conscious Harmony, practice a form of meditation called centering prayer. Those are sort of the two pillars of the Church of Conscious Harmony. And so I dove in there. Gurdjieff's psychology is really the foundation for everything that I do now. So that's a good transition. I didn't have it on my list, but we're going to hear a little about Gurdjieff. But I wanted to just say when I was listening to you, I've mentioned it on this show a few times. There's another one of our allies here, Father Bill W. Has been on here a few times, and he makes this point that you got to get sober, and go to meetings and all that. But when you relapse, do not come and tell me that it's because you didn't go to meetings and you didn't talk to your sponsor. It's because you didn't find something meaningful to fill that old hole. That's right. Well, and we do have to work our program and find a spiritual, some kind of a spiritual activity to try to replace that kind of evil shit that we're up. I don't know much about evil, but the stuff that you were talking about, which is, you didn't care about anybody. I mean, that's right.
We are so selfish when we're in that addictive cycle. And
absolutely.
And when we find little, my daughter, and now, you're probably not wanting to get your whole family story out here in public, but I happen to know that JC Shakespeare is a super dad. He's in the super dad category. Not only is he not selfish, he's giving so much love to those kids. And it's really beautiful. You found meaning in so many different ways. Anything you want to say right now, Wes?
No, I'm being kind of new in this recovery thing. A lot of the stuff he talked about, trying to find his meaning is kind of, something I'm still working with. So I was wondering if you have any, kind of just advice or just, tools that you can share to someone out. Cause like me, I'm still trying to find myself, after 20 years of putting this shit in my body and now having to deal with all these emotions. My identity was that drink, that this, escape. And now I'm,
right.
I'm conscious now.
And dick jokes, right?
And dick jokes. Well, dick jokes are still a huge part of my life, and I'm not ready to give
and
those
always
up.
will be.
Yeah,
yes.
yes.
Hang on to your dick jokes.
Yes. But it's one of the things that I really struggle with. One of the reasons why I used was because I don't know who the fuck I am. And I hated that feeling. I hated that feeling of not knowing who I was, not knowing what my convictions were, not knowing, how to live. I see all these other people that seem so confident in who they are. They could be themselves at all times, no matter what situation they were in. And I just couldn't do that because I didn't know who the fuck I was. And I was wondering if there's any, I know you said you went to a meditation and 10-day meditation that had this kind of experience. And I'm like, God, when is that going to fucking happen for me? But if there's any kind of tools that you can, that kind of put you on the right path of kind of figuring that out, of kind of self-discovery for someone like me and other people listening.
Well, absolutely. And that's a beautiful segue into talking a little bit about Gurdjieff and how that accelerated my awakening, because what Gurdjieff says is, and he described his work with a capital W as, he called it the work of inner Christianity. And not because you have to be a Christian to do it, but because he believed that he traced this wisdom way back into antiquity. And he believed that the message that Jesus was trying to convey in the Gospels was this inner teaching of inner psychology. And Gurdjieff said, not that man fell at the Garden of Eden and that we were all screwed. He said, man's only sin is that he is asleep. And so for those of us who have some kind of a magnetic center, which means I've got some affinity for, like, knowing what you just described, Wes, that the world with all its trappings and all its glitter and blah blah blah, all that shit is an illusion. Mm-hmm. And the little baby comes into the world with what he called essence, and that's sort of the blueprint for the potential of what you could become in the world. And essence is very fragile, and it's very pure, and it's very weak when it comes into the world, and it has to be protected. So we start having interactions with our caregivers, and as we get a little older, we start having interactions with peers, and then we have teachers, and then we have coaches, and all of these people that we interact with, and we start to build this false personality around the core of our essence. Well, somewhere around the age of 12 or 13, we take that personality as ourself, and that's exactly what you just described. I'm the guy who, life of the party. I'm telling jokes. Oh, JC, oh fuck, I love that guy. He's hilarious, Right. And you want to fuck with somebody's head, find one person that doesn't like me, and it's like, oh my God, what do you mean? Why don't you like me? What don't you like about me? Right. So the first thing to realize is that I am not this personality that I'm putting out there in the world. There's something deeper, something behind that is my essence, or my true self, you'll hear it described. Mm-hmm. And another word for the false personality is the ego. That's a very user-friendly term for us to understand.
Sure.
So what happens is, in that journey of self-discovery, if we're in the shell, the protective shell of our ego, we're shutting everything else out. And that's why, for me, it was going and volunteering with that one kid at Fillmore Middle School. I'm getting out of myself, and I'm showing interest, and I'm showing curiosity in another human being's life, and figuring out what I can do to serve that person. And when you do that, it just opens a doorway. And I can't, yes, I had that one experience on the 10-day retreat, but that was simply the focal point of a larger unfolding that was happening. Mm-hmm. And it really is as simple as and this is why the 12th step keeps everybody in the game. Not everybody, but it keeps a lot of people in the game, because I'm helping another alcoholic. I'm helping somebody else. I'm out of the trapped in self.
Right.
And think about this goes back to talking about another one of my sort of wisdom teachers, Richard Rudd, the guy who came up with the gene keys. He says that the essential human desire is for connection, unity, and wholeness. And any desire that doesn't take us toward that only creates more desire. So that's why the fumbling around and looking for myself and not figuring out, what is that, right?
Right.
It's because we have all these desires. I want to be famous. I want to be rich. I don't want to have to work this hard. It's all bullshit.
Right.
It's all bullshit, you know.
Like sugar. It's like sugar.
Yeah.
I eat sugar. I want more of it, and I never get satisfied.
Exactly. You know, drinking, right? Like, when did you ever say to yourself, "I think I've had enough"? You know,
in the jail
only
cell.
after being, exactly. When you're like, "Holy shit, I'm a criminal."
Yeah.
You got that, Wes? You got the answer now?
Yeah, can you repeat that? Those three. Well, I know that I loved what he said about Can you repeat that? The three when you're thinking about what the three places that you're always trying to go. Can you repeat that part? That on your
the three pillars.
Yeah, the three pillars.
The challenge, breakthrough, and core stability.
No, what every person is looking for in their life. And if you're not headed there, then you're on the wrong direction. Stability, except what.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it was connection, unity, and wholeness.
Okay, connection, unity.
Yeah.
Don't throw any fourth dimension. JC can only think in trinities. The Trinity
it's
thing.
The law of three.
No, I love that. The 12th step has been easily the thing that has kept me in recovery the most. Like helping other people easily has been my saving grace.
There's there's a reason that's the 12th step though, because many of us did that helping others as a codependent, trying to make myself feel better about myself.
Right.
You know, that 12th step is there. It should come sort of naturally when we get to the 12th step, because we're full and we're not urgent to try to make other people feel better so that we feel better. It's a very different idea.
Right. Because you could, when you learn something new, you come off as a zealot, right? And everybody has to believe this, so the, what I found was, as I started to help more people, and I started like working with the teen group at the church and teaching Sunday school, and I became genuinely interested in the lives of other people. Mm-hmm. And that was never part of my makeup. I didn't give a shit about anybody else. Right. I really didn't. And that's a terrible way to live.
And it's and the three of us have something really working against us. I don't know if anybody's ever told you you're smart, JC or Wes, or people have told me I'm pretty creative. I don't get a whole lot of smart. You guys probably get more smart, but that's not a compliment necessarily, because here the reason is we think we've got it, which keeps us from the other 99.9% of the truth, right?
Right.
So
another part of the Gurdjieff thing that's important here is the three centers. We have an intellectual center, we have an emotional center, and we have the body, or what he called the moving center. And we think the intellectual center is running the show, and when it is, that's just the playground for the ego.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Like it will reinforce any story that your ego cooks up. Your mind will be going, yes, absolutely, that'll work. And meanwhile, you've got this like pit of emptiness in your emotional center going, God, why can't I feel happy?
Yeah.
Why am I still so fucked up?
Yep.
Right? It's because you're not paying attention. The emotional center is starved.
But it has to. For most of us, we usually have one of these three things, right? Smart, tough, or fixing shit, right? And some of us have all three of those, right? And it takes some kind of an impact to slap me into a shock of some kind to get me into that. And I know we'll talk a little bit about a couple of yours here in a moment, but for me, it was out when she left me. Oh my God, for the 8th time, by the way. By the 8th time, I finally pushed her away, and she was married. When somebody's married to somebody else, it's over. But I was suicidal, and that's what. And I wound up in a Episcopal priest's office who said, okay, Bob, I'll hold some space for you, but you need to get to some meetings. And a therapist. And that's kind of where it started for me. This downward spiral thing that you wrote about, is that just a kind of a descriptive reference, or is that a specific thing that's related to the gene keys, or what is it? Will you talk about that?
So yeah, the important part is not the downward spiral. That's just the part that everybody can relate to, because we've all had one. That's where one thing breaks down in your life and it causes another thing to break down. Pretty soon the whole thing's going down the shitter. So the opposite of that is what I've called the architecture of the ascending spiral. And this is how we grow and hopefully lock in some of that transformation along the way. So this comes from, I'm a big pattern guy, as you can tell. I like to see the patterns and everything. That's how I think. I need to see a pattern, or else I can't make sense of things. And so Richard Rudd, the gene keys, just to give you a quick thing, is a wisdom teaching about how the planetary alignments when you were born imprinted a code into your DNA.
Here we go.
To me, coming from that background of the Gurdjieff, it's how to get in touch with your essence and bring that forth into the world. Okay? So Richard Rudd identified this pattern, and he called it challenge, breakthrough, core stability. And so he also, all of these gene keys have 3 vibrational levels. There's the shadow level, which is where we are most of the time. There's the gift. Every shadow contains a gift that can bring you to the highest state, which he calls the siddhi, S-I-D-D-H-I. So without going too much into that, the pattern is, when we're in a time like you were just describing, Wes, where like, I don't know who I am, everything I do just doesn't seem to like go anywhere, it's not working out. You're in a time of challenge. And if you can take that, oh, I'm so depressed, oh, I'm so angry, or whatever you're in, and go, okay, let me reframe this. I'm in a time of challenge. Mm-hmm. And if I stick with a challenge, if I stay present to what the challenge is, in other words, if I allow myself to go into my body and feel those feelings, really, really get in touch with them and don't run away from them, and let myself experience the rage and experience the anger and experience the sadness, the grief, whatever it is that's eating my lunch, I connect with that, and then I'm in the challenge, and I'm looking for the new insight, the new awareness, the new bodily sensation that kind of like I was describing with those tumblers clicking, and that was a visceral experience of wholeness, right? And when that comes, it's a breakthrough, and it changes you and it strengthens your core stability. So then you cross the finish line and you're done, right? No, it prepares you for the next challenge. So if you can see your life and think about, like, you know, your own experience or other people's experience with relapse. There's an interview that I shared with Bob a while back with Russell Brand interviewing Tommy Rosen, who's got a community called Recovery 2.0. And they were talking about, when you get to a certain stage of like spiritual growth, the ground underneath your feet starts to feel real shaky. And you're like, I don't know what's happening to me, right? I'm not sure what's going on. And it feels so uncomfortable that it's like, well, if I go back and take a drink, I know it's not good, but man, it sure feels comfortable because that's my old neighborhood.
Right.
So we have to recognize that when we hit that patch of where we feel the core stability coming together, and it's like, now we're on to the next challenge. So feeling that uncomfortable ground shaking underneath my feet is just the next challenge showing up. Right. And it's to be embraced open-heartedly and open-mindedly.
Yeah, that's great. I got goosebumps listening to you. So, so that's what my question to you is. You know, I've had that experience where I've felt this spiritual kind of, you know, growth and not necessarily like a, you know, awakening or whatever, but feeling the higher power, feeling closer to something. How do you like, what's some advice that you have to how to keep that, how to maintain that? Because that's one of my biggest things is, you know, I'll get it and then I have trouble maintaining it. And then it's like this constant, you know, like I want to be on the ground and keep climbing. But once I you know, get there, so how can you maintain that?
Beautiful question, because what happens is when we get that feeling, we want to we want to grab it and lock it in and hold on to it, which is what kills it.
Yeah.
Right. So this is an example of a story in the Bible that never made any sense to me until I looked at it from this more sort of esoteric view. There's a story of the Transfiguration where Jesus takes Peter and a couple other guys up onto the mountain, and he becomes filled with light so that his clothes shone, and this intense like nuclear fusion light is engulfing him, and the disciples see him talking to Elijah and Moses, right? And the first thing that Peter says when he kind of comes out of it is like, let's build some houses for you guys so we can stay here, right? And Jesus is like, it's gone, dude. It's over, right? It happened. And so recognizing that this spiritual unloading is a process. There is no finish line. And that's why, like, doing your dailies and doing your nightlies, like all of that stuff is so important because it is part of the process. I remember when I was at the treatment center I worked at, I kept the clients were coming in and they were complaining about all the rules. How come we can't have our phones? And I said, listen, you guys could sit here and use up 2 hours of group time bitching and moaning about the rules if you want to. It's your group. That's fine. I said, or you could also realize that you're having some uncomfortable emotions come up, and you could let yourself feel those emotions as they come up, process them in this group, talk about them, feel them, and see if they don't change. And so we got into this thing where one of the clients, we kept talking about the process. You always hear process your emotions, right? Yeah. It's life is energy. So if the energy's flowing through us, we're feeling pretty good. As soon as we constrict around it or try to hold on to it, it shuts us off. It's like going.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which, both of these guys, for our listeners, are also staff members of several different programs, one of which is the Braveheart Experience, which is a intensive weekend workshop for men. And, this is really relevant. What a lot of what we do is to help men step down into the pain that's been lodged in their body for a long time, because that's exactly what we do, JC. I know whenever we get hurt, when we grab a hold of it tight, and our body learns to hold on to it. And you and I have just recently did another workshop with really young guys that already had locked onto a bunch of pain and fear and anger that was in their gut. And it takes a while to kind of get down into it. And it's for exactly the reason that it takes a major train wreck for most of us to be able to say, all right, wait a minute, I can stay with this pain just a little bit longer because of the consequences of not doing it. That's the advantage of treatment. Right? It's like guys like you and me, Wes, without a container. And I mean, that's probably a really good analogy, if that's what that is, a container. Absolutely. with a really good sealed top on it is what it takes for somebody like me to stay with my feelings. The point I'm heading toward here is that we could wait 15 years, and maybe life itself would help me to work through the shit. But if we can create a loving, solid, strong container, that stuff can come up, and I can cough up those hairballs, and I don't have to live according to those negative messages that old shit creates. So I think I'm using a different language to kind of say the same thing, because I know the kind of container that you create for folks. And here's the three of us. I happen to know my story pretty well. I happen to know your stories well too, and the particular things that cranked up our acting out such that we got in enough pain to ask for help. I'm going to read a little quote you've already said some of this, JC, so I'm going to quote some Shakespeare here. The first one I'm going to say is, "To thine old self be true." That's William Shakespeare. And now here's a quote from the blog that's coming out later this week than this after this podcast that JC wrote for us. But anyway, this is JC Shakespeare quote. In the old days, the end of a relationship signaled permission to crawl into a bottle and numb myself for as long as was socially acceptable. And then some, and then some. This time, I confronted the challenge of staying sober and feeling every feeling that arose. While I went through waves of grief, anger, and resentment, I also came to the breakthrough that it was possible to feel deep emotion without anesthetic. Yeah, in this psychiatric world, how you feel? Here, let me give you a pill. All right. Okay. I also, without anesthetic, and that the feelings were actually neutralized when I allowed them to be present in my consciousness. This was a breakthrough and allowed me to strengthen my core stability and emotional awareness and insight. Yeah. That's the training to be a therapist right there, right? I mean, what are they going to teach you at Texas State?
Yeah. And well, I was married to the mother of my daughters for 16 years. And, we were in some shadow patterns that, just seemed like it would have been impossible to untangle. And so we sort of, as amicably as we could, the conscious uncoupling or whatever Gwyneth Paltrow calls it, decided I moved out. And that was hard because you know what it's like, Bob, like, the realization that I was going to have to move out of the house where my 3 daughters lived was unbearable. And grace always comes in, and I found a place to stay and do my healing. And there were times where I was literally doubled up in the fetal position on the floor, wailing with grief. I remember my dog died, and it just it brought up this primal scream of grief. And because I was doing this work, and I had just been through Braveheart and all of this, and I was facing it. I remember pulling off at the dog park after we put him down and just crying so hard. And that voice where you hear yourself and you're like, Jesus, pull it together, man. You're losing your shit here. I ignored that, and I put as much energy into howling as I could. And I just, snot and tears in my, just in my car, just like having this intense paroxysm of grief. And I'm telling you, man, when that finally washed through, like a big storm blowing through the neighborhood, man, I felt it. And that was right when I was stepping into my private practice full time.
And you weren't just grieving the dog. That's or right. The loss of the relationship. It opens the channel of grief from the old channel of grief. And you're also talking about that point that we make here at Deep Waters a lot. Grief and joy are the same damn river. You know anything about this? The voice that says "pull it together," Wes?
Yeah, it's always with me. But I do know the feeling of relief when you finally let go. And I mean, God, how long had you been sober when you had to leave the house, JC?
Not long at all. I've sort of gone back and forth into drinking a little bit and coming out of it. So. I actually
he's been a fairly functional dude, and he may not sound like you're a little bit of a newcomer on that topic. You almost have to say that, but you've been on the recovery topic for a long time.
Yeah, okay. because to answer your question, I did on December 12th, 2018. I made a conscious decision. I'm not drinking anymore, and to do this work, because I knew what was coming. It had been coming, right? It had been coming. And, I'll tell you what, I had before that happened, I had this was one of the most enlightening moments. I was having an argument with my wife, and we kind of got into it, and she's like, letting me have it. And she says, I have been waiting for years for you to be this evolved, enlightened, spiritual person that you say you are, and I've been nothing but disappointed.
Yeah.
And I literally had my finger in the air to rebut, and I was just like, holy shit, that's how I feel about myself.
Yeah.
And I saw my face to face with my shadow.
Yeah, you get sometimes we get the feedback from the last person on the planet. My daughter's mom, it's rung through me so many times. She said, "You're the most brilliant man I've ever known, Bob," and that is not a compliment. She's like I'm a judgmental prick, is what she meant.
Right.
Yeah. You know.
Right.
And I think I know everything about everything, but not necessarily living my life according to that. And that's a wake up call.
Yeah,
yes, absolutely.
My son's mom one time said to me, "You could have the whole world eating out of your hand, but you choose to have them spit in it." And that really was like, oof, okay.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So the
well,
folks,
it showed me a truth that I needed to see, and I when I realized that all these stories that I had about who she was and how she was holding me back from becoming the person I wanted to be were gone. Like I couldn't tell myself those stories anymore.
Then you had to find some other excuse. Then who's holding me back now? Let me figure. And eventually,
this guy.
Eventually we run out of places to point, and then if you get to enough meetings, they tell you there's 3 fingers pointing back at you, and then they say if you spot it, you've got it. And then all this shit, all these cliches, if I surround the cliches are cliches because they're true. And I'll tell you what, in 12-step recovery, there's a thread of everything that you've talked about here that has a Jungian flavor to it. The shadow you've mentioned several times here. I think that's probably, we'll launch into all of that probably next time, JC, because I think we're kind of coming toward a place where, but there's a couple of topics I want to make sure we fool around with here.
Sure.
I think this thing you said about these challenges take us to new heights, right? It's like you got to find a place to talk about the mess that's safe enough to talk about the mess. If I want to have that joy, it's like the world is just set up in opposites. It's a Jungian concept, but it's duality. Just say a little bit about that. Then I want to launch into the comedy sci-fi topic just for a few minutes. A little bit about that tension of the opposites.
So, this is that challenge, breakthrough, core stability is a pattern that you can see in other language. Like in the attachment world, they talk about attachment, rupture, repair. Hegel, the German philosopher, talked about dialectics. He said there's a thesis, there's an antithesis, and from that comes synthesis. So we all know that resistance is part of growth, right? You don't go to the gym and lift paper towel tubes to bulk up, right? You have to have some resistance that tears the muscle and then builds it back stronger. So that's a pattern that's found in nature. So Gurdjieff talked about the law of 3 as being there are 3 forces in every single thing that manifests in reality. There's the intention or the wish, which he called the active force. There's the resistance that the universe throws up. Like, think about it. You go on a diet, somebody brings a chocolate cake into the office, right? The resistance shows up. And if you just let time deteriorate that tension, nothing changes and everything breaks down. So what we're looking for is that what Gurdjieff called third force, the reconciling force or the neutralizing force, that when you can see the opposition between 2 forces in your life, I'm trying to do this thing and such is still in my way, right? You have to open up and kind of see it from a higher perspective before something can click in. If you're stuck complaining about the resistance. So to give you an example we just talked about, me and my wife go, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. As soon as I made a conscious decision that I'm taking 100% responsibility for my emotional state, it was like this stuff just started to break up and fall away.
Yep. It's very much like the 8th and 9th step, right? It's the eighth step is where you make the list, right? But the list comes out of my resentments. The people that I'm going to go make amends to really have come out of my resentments. I got to actually, and here's the other thing, right, JC? there's certain worlds where everybody wants you to be really nice, never be judgmental, never say the truth, never let your shadow out, right? Very safe. But when that's the case, you can't let these forces come out and let them be there for a moment. You got to be there for a moment to let them rise up out of the unconscious so that I can see them, right? I don't even know that I'm such a prick.
Absolutely.
I've got to have a safe enough space to be the true prick that I am.
Right. And as long as you're looking at somebody else as the problem, you can't get to it. You can't get to it.
Well, at first, though, don't you think you need to create a container where it's safe enough to say, yeah, I see that person as and then my arm gets sore.
Ideally, yes. You should have a container, whether it's therapy or doing Braveheart or whatever it is that allows you to express that.
Or a good therapist that will give me space to be, not perfect, to say the stuff that's actually going on in my head. That's one of my complaints about the healing world, the religious world. It's like this phrase that goes, I'm not judgmental. Oh, thank you. Oh, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, that's like people that go, I'm a very self-aware person.
Oh, yes, I'm very aware. Very aware. Thank you very much.
You have to tell me that you're not very self-aware.
By the way, I'm from a good family. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, I want to kind of make a transition here to, that kind of thing I mentioned earlier. We got to work a program. We've got to get a rhythm, some kind of a spiritual rhythm. And for those of us that have done a bunch of wacko stuff in a ritualistic way, also known as addiction, right? And you stop doing that. Yes, a spiritual program, but you better start doing something that has one way to say it is you better figure out some way to get high. Yeah. Because we are built that way. We were looking for that high and we did it in a counterfeit way. It's a little bit of a transition to you. There's a part of you that lights up. I fall asleep, honestly, with sci-fi stuff. I don't know what there is about it, but it puts me to sleep when you start telling but I watch other people listening to you and say, what? Wow, tell me more about that. So, but I know it lights you up. But JC,
take a nap and I'll talk.
JC is a screenwriter and is writing this vast thing that we hope is going to be a movie soon. So, say a little bit about following your bliss as part of recovery.
Yeah. Thank you. I knew when I was 17 that I wanted to be a writer, and I could never get my shit together to stick with something long enough to see it through. And so I developed this huge fear pattern of even starting anything new. And part of the reason I got into stand-up was because, you could be drunk and write something on a cocktail napkin and tell it the next night on stage and get a laugh. There's your reward, and a piece of art takes long extended persistence. And so this story started coming to me. It happened. I was driving up to Waco. This was probably 6 years ago or something. And I always like to look at road signs that have names built into the cities. So there's two little towns up near Waco, Temple and Leon. And I saw this sign that said Leon Temple. And I was like, who the hell is Leon Temple? And I started spinning this thing about what it would be like if I was 80 years old and looking back and trying to tell somebody the wisdom of my life. And this is the thing about opening up and having a download, right? I have a partner, my friend Rex, one of my oldest comedy buddies, and we've written some things together. And I pitched him this idea about this old guy who, as the genre is actually called cli-fi. It's climate fiction. And it's about what will happen to the world when the climate gets so inhospitable to humans that we have to struggle to survive. And so as the waters are rising and inland property is becoming more valuable and more in conflict, this guy builds a place underneath the ocean, and he goes the opposite direction of what everybody else is doing. And he creates what we call the ark beneath the sea. And it's this story of planetary healing, they figure out all these ways to balance the carbon cycle and do this work. And over the course of 3 stories, they end up transforming the planet and transforming humanity. And it has a lot to do with light. So the 3 titles are called Weaving Light, Leaving Light, and Receiving Light.
Another trilogy? Oh my God. Everything is trilogy with you.
Law of 3, Bob. You have to follow the law of 3.
I really like the part that he does everything different than everyone else. Now that got my attention. But you know what else got my attention is the warmth that comes over your face when you're talking about it, brother. Really, I'm serious. There's a different energy that comes through you when you start talking about this child that you're birthing.
Yes.
And we've all got to find we're built to grow we're built to grow as creative people. One of the things we do at Braveheart is we force these guys who have been out there doing this crazy shit. Most addicts are wildly creative, but they don't. But full of shame, and we don't know how to share it. We don't think it's a gift to share. It's a gift to share with other people that God is, or whatever name you want to call it. I mean, and if we don't let it come through us, it's like constipation. You don't have to get an image. Right. You don't have to get that image, but but you're letting it come through you, brother, and it looks really good on you. And
thank you.
Anything else any of you guys want to say as we're kind of going to the end here?
Yeah, I'll just to kind of try to wrap that up. That this is now the battleground where I go into battle with my own fear and internal resistance. Like, I'm not good enough to write this. It's too much work. I can't do this. I've never finished anything. And I have to, I'm trying to now like embrace those fears and integrate them and find out where the resistance is and then go with it. And, the last thing I wanted to say is just that my version of good mental health is I have a neutral place inside of me, right? I'm not happy all the time. I'm neutral most of the time. That way, when some emotional energy enters the system, I notice it, I identify, I give it the energy and attention that it deserves and let myself feel it, and I release it. And I come back to that neutral state. And that's what Bob was saying. When you go into the depths and you express this deep pain and you realize, oh, I'm still okay. Like, I didn't die. I'm still here. Like, then you have that in your memory bank that I can do that work. Yeah. And that is the most liberating thing. Beautiful. That I think.
Beautiful. And once you really get to this place that JC has arisen to, then you care enough about yourself to buy a whiteboard. That is the largest whiteboard I've ever seen in my entire life right there. He's mapped out this sci-fi trilogy on there. I've gone to his place a few times, and it's like there's a technology to writing that you've had to really dive into. And I don't know. Thank you for all of the have you learned everything you need, Wes, today to go live your life in complete bliss?
I don't think I need to do anything else. I think I'm healed. I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah. So really grateful for both of you guys. You've got so much wisdom, JC, and thanks for sharing it. We'll get you back on here to do chapter 2, 3 through 50 on here. You're really a part of JC is a team member of Deep Waters. He's one of our therapeutic recovery coaches, and he's in the center of this thing. We're bringing a movement forward that a lot of it's based on a lot of the things we talked about today. And we have a world that could probably use a little more consciousness, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And we need somebody's got to create containers for this to happen. So that's kind of what we're up to at Deep Waters, and with all of the stuff that all three of us are up to. So JC, before we kind of get out of here, why don't you say how people can reach you for all of the great stuff that you're up to?
Absolutely. Best place to find me is at jcshakespeare.com. That's my website, and probably got to fix some links on there or something, but that's my website, and it's got all my contact information there. I do have private practice. Currently doing telehealth, but I've got some people that want to try to meet in person. So I'm looking for creative solutions to that right now, but love to work with adolescents, but especially like adult men who are trying to really figure out why all the things that life supposedly promised them aren't measuring up, and why they're unhappy. So
yeah, there aren't very many of those.
No, it's not a growth market at all.
I'll be calling you later.
Yeah, please.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I have to ask, because I know there's maybe other people wondering the same thing with the last name Shakespeare. Is there a relation there, or?
Yes, my grandfather was named William.
Yeah, that's too many centuries back.
No, to give you the straight answer, my uncle William Shakespeare went with his my cousin Doug, and they went to England and tried to trace it back, and they got see, William Shakespeare's son died at the age of 13, so he didn't have there's no direct descendants from William Shakespeare.
Gotcha.
And so they traced it back 2 generations away from his brother John Shakespeare. So that's probably they couldn't quite make those last 2 links, but that's probably the family that we.
John was the criminal addict, wasn't he? I don't know.
Probably so.
Comedian, yeah.
Yeah.
Sci-fi writer. All right, he was writing about the future of a bunch of therapists in the 20th century. All right. So, okay, I love you guys. Both of you guys do also happen to be really just connected brothers of mine and have helped me grow. I really appreciate you bringing your hearts and your wisdom here today. So, Nicole, I don't know if you're still there with all this bro stuff that we've been doing. Thank you for Nicole is our program manager, and if you would just kind of check in about how people can reach us for our Deep Waters program and to be involved in this podcast or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, please reach out to us if you have any questions. Our number is 512-677-7847. Email us, admin@deepwatersrecovery.com. If you have any questions about the program, comments, if you want to reach out, be part of the podcast, please call us. Our website is deepwatersrecovery.com. We post weekly blogs from our community. Our podcast comes out weekly. You can follow us on all the social media sites, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and our YouTube channel is The Recovery Crew.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I do know that an upcoming podcast is with Cole Shiflett. Some of you guys know him. He started a bunch of treatment centers. He's a wild man, by the way. You think these 2 guys are wild? We're going to get a true wild man on here. It's probably next week or the week after. So we're, as Nicole said, we are on all of the social media platforms, as well as our YouTube channel if you want to see the video version of this. Apparently liking, sharing, subscribing will really help this movement move forward. Deep Waters Recovery Programs, it's a 10-hour program where people are launching into lives of meaning. But first, we really probably need to take a look at our dependencies a little bit, whether it's substance or love or sex or whatever we're using to not feel, and then to deal with some of the trauma. That's what we do in that program. We call it an advanced healing program, because a lot of the work that we're doing is related to a lot of what JC was talking about today. So, and reach out to us if you're interested in any of that. It's really good to have everyone with us, and come back next week. Check us out on all the social media spots, and our website is deepwatersrecovery.com. You're in the deep waters now.